There's one question I have for you. Mayweather does a piece that came out on ESPN where he's interviewed. He says that on paper, McGregor has the edge. So this is Mayweather talking. He's a lot younger. When you look at myself and Conor McGregor on paper, he's taller, has longer reach. He's a bigger man from top to bottom. He's a lot younger, so youth is on his side, and I've been off for a couple of years. I'm in my 40s, so if you look at everything on paper, it leans towards McGregor. I'm older. I'm not the same fighter I was 2 years ago. I'm not the same fighter I was 5 years ago. I lost a step. A fighter like Andre Berto isn't even supposed to go the distance with Floyd Mayweather. But remember, I was 38. Obviously, I'm slipping a little bit to even let a fighter like that go the distance with me. I'm not what I used to be. I used to have a 90% knockout ratio. It's obvious I've slipped somewhere. Somewhere has taken a toll on my career. Blah, blah, blah. So he comes right out and says it. Hey, on Conor, here it is. What do you think?
Well, hold on a second. Now, I thought we were going to tease Floyd for his obvious transparency in the fact that he's trying to sell a fight by reverse engineering the facts. To have any kind of a big fight, historically speaking, you must have two pools of thought. I think Conor can win versus I think Floyd can win. When everybody believes Floyd is going to win, it's tough to sell a fight. So Floyd himself now is coming out as the showman to beat the beat the drum here for Conor.
Is that true, though? Because we all knew Tyson was going to win. It was just a matter of how many seconds will it take. People tuned in to see, is he going to do it in 45 seconds?
That's a rarity, though. There's only two fighters in the history of the sport that have been able to sell by themselves. Mike Tyson and Oscar De La Hoya. It did not matter who their opponents were. So those are a couple offs there that I just have to take out of your equation. The history of fighting says that. Chris Weidman was absolutely primed by everybody in the know to beat Anderson Silva. Now, common belief said otherwise. One of the biggest problems that the promotion had was selling that fight because nobody thought that Chris could win. All the boys in the back knew Chris was going to be the new champion tonight and the guards changing hands. Everybody knew it was going to be Chris. 100% of the guys. You want to find a fighter that said Anderson's going to win this fight. You would not find a person in the media or the public or the audience that thought that Chris had a shot of winning. So in this case, somebody's got to Floyd and said, hey, Floyd, this is beyond stupid and we're tracking a little bit slow here. Floyd went a little over the top with that. First off, Floyd's a dum-dum. And whenever you have a guy as absolutely stupid as Floyd is, but with that level of money, generally we will associate wealth with intelligence. In this case, no. He's a really rich guy that's a dum-dum. So when he comes out and he thinks he's a better actor than the world is at perceiving acting, and he comes out with such an outlandish story, I thought that's where you were going with this. But it sounds like maybe he lured you in. Maybe now you fell for it, and he's tipping his hat to Conor. I mean, if I was the reporter, he said that piece with Stephen A. Smith. I watched it this morning. Stephen should have quickly questioned him and go, well, Floyd, I just lost interest in the fight. If you're telling me that you, who I hold as an iconic figure of boxing, is about to pass the torch to an amateur who's never done it before, who will retire 1-0, but that 1 is bigger than the 49 that you have that came before it, I guess I'm out. You would have seen Floyd instantly sing a different tune. Well, I don't know about that, Michael. Don't forget, I've had 49 fights, and I was on an Olympic team, and I had an amateur career team. My pops used to box, and my uncle boxed, and so if Michael would have steered in and agreed with Floyd, yeah, Floyd, you're right about that. You are too old to be in here, and kind of wondering what you're doing. Floyd would have quickly ran it the other way because he's a dum-dum. He had his script in mind. He thought he was going to fool everybody. Go, oh, my God, Floyd's going to go down. He does. Usually his recipe is right, so I don't blame him for that. Floyd has come up on two sides of the fence, and the first was him convincing people he could win. He used to be the underdog in fights and have to convince me, no, I can beat this guy. Then after he started beating all those guys and started amassing all those belts and those records and taking those names down, it had to go to the other side. To where, no, Oscar's the guy that could stop him. No, Manny's the guy that can stop him. No, Miguel is the guy that can stop him. And, he had to start doing this. So he's following the recipe as he knows it. He's just missing that this is a different thing. This is not like the 49 fights you had before. We don't really care who's going to win. We care about what's going to happen. That's why we're watching this fight. Your press conference, Floyd, should have reprogrammed you to go, no, wait a minute. me coming out and be the king of the world and saying this Irish kid that's never done it before has no chance is enough. It's never been enough before. That never sold historically before. But this is not an event that can be related to history. This is an iconic one-off, never going to happen again for another 20 to 30 years, where you're going to get all the people to come to the table, take two guys from different sports and have this. It's been 30 years since it happened before, when Gorilla Monsoon and Muhammad Ali got in there, and everybody thinks it was Inoki and Ali. That's because they're wrong on their histories. Actually, Gorilla Monsoon did Ali. That did so well that they then took it to Japan, and the Inoki fight with Ali is the one that's known as the one you can find on YouTube. But historically, that's not correct. So, but I will tell you this. That's where Floyd's not understanding it. Floyd, you sold out press conferences to light this kid up and tell him he's easy work. Don't try to take it back now. The recipe's here. This is going to do great business.
So
but you're now
advising
getting in
Floyd.
the way.
You're advising Floyd. What do you tell him to say at this point?
Tell the truth. You have no chance. I carry the reputation of boxing on my shoulders. Everything I've ever believed in tells me that hard work, experience, footwork, speed, timing, and combinations matter. If you can walk in here and beat me, it means my life's work and my life belief isn't true. That's the pressure that I have on my shoulders. Yes, I'm doing this to make money, but I'm also doing it to show this is not a sport where two guys put gloves on and throw punches at one another until one guy gets tired or the judges step in. That's not what this is. We call it the sweet science, and by God, it is. There is a science to what I'm doing. My experience matters. My knowledge matters. My dad's experience and my grandfather's experience and all the guys that I fought and all the guys I came up with and all the things I sacrificed matter. You haven't done any of that. You've insulted me by coming to this world, and I'm going to shut you up, period. And that should be the truth. And that should be enough. And Conor should be able to come out and tell the truth, too. And say, you know what? You got a fringe sport. The only recognizable body on the face of the planet that says you even are a sport is the International Olympic Committee. The NCAA says you're not, and that's why they don't contest you. The NAIA says you're not, and that's why they don't contest you. Every high school and every municipality in this country says you're not a real sport, and they don't contest you. I can't find a boxing gym in my hometown or my home state. As a matter of fact, in the entire country, we have 3. You're not a real sport. And me coming in as a good athlete that's got a bit of an understanding of how the hands work, some pretty good footworks and good conditioning myself is enough to beat you because your sport sucks. And that's what's being contested here. Is boxing real or isn't it? That's what is on the line for this fight. And there is no make-believe I'm 40 years old and I'm the bigger guy or he's the smaller guy or whose arms are longer than whose or who was born on this day. None of it means a goddamn. Boxing's either real or it's not. And I can remember, you're seeing boxing enthusiasts and you're not going to meet very many of them. This whole boxing community, there's really no such. It's a very small community. But for the people within the community, Ryan, they're sweating bullets. And their way of handling this, handling what could happen, which is they get a big reveal that the Easter Bunny doesn't really come each year. The way they're just tuning out. They're closing their eyes. They're saying they're not even going to watch it. We dealt with this same thing in 1993 when the UFC came out, and we were all led to believe that karate was the greatest martial arts out there, and kung fu was behind that, and aikido was behind that. And we quickly found out that those guys that had dedicated their lives and their money, and their dads drove them to the gym, and they punched the air and learned to break boards all day long, and got that black belt, were a bunch of wimps when it came to a real fight. We found out they were lied to. They'd never actually tested it. They'd never actually gone out and fought anybody. You would think when mixed martial arts came about, oh man, the karate gyms are going to sit down and study this stuff. The judo gyms are going to love this. The aikidos and the kung fus and the everything else that you could think of. They're going to love this. No, those were the last guys to watch because those were the guys that had reality revealed to them, and it scared them, and it made them go, oh my God. Oh my God, what I held to be self-evident, what my pops told me, what my master and my sensei told me, all those dances and proms and parties I passed up to go to practice and tournament on Saturday, to be the baddest dude in the world like Chuck Norris that was on TV, it was all fake. I'm a wimp. I have no actual skills. That's what happened. That's why you don't see karate gyms watching mixed martial arts. They don't want to know the reality. The masters of those gyms that make a living off of those kids tell them not to watch it. They don't want them to know, hey, you don't actually know how to fight. I'm going to give you some self-confidence here, but it's all based on BS. I'm going to have you punch the air, and when you leave each night, I'm going to pat you on the back and tell you what a dangerous guy you are and that your hands are weapons, and over a certain period of time, you're going to believe it, and that's going to give you confidence. And that's all true. But by God, I'm not actually teaching you how to fight. I don't know how to fight myself. I've never been in one. That's what you're seeing with the boxing world. They are scared to death of the reality that their sport is fake. I side with boxing. I am a boxer. I believe in boxing. My father believed in boxing. And Ryan, I can tell you firsthand, I am scared to death that I'm going to find out I'm not right. And my coach, who whatever comes out of his mouth is gospel to me, Clayton Heyer sat in that chair you're sitting in right now. He leaned into that microphone you're sitting at right now. He looked me in the eye and he said, for Floyd Mayweather, I do not like this matchup. He said he thinks Conor McGregor's going to win. And I hope to hell for the first time ever my coach Clayton is wrong, because it will devastate me to find out that boxing is a sham, that there is no sweet science, that combinations, footwork, speed, timing, and experience are not a real thing, that all you've got is two dum-dums with gloves on their hands throwing punches at one another until one of them falls down or until time runs out and the three Poindexters with clipboards sitting ringside render a decision. That will devastate me. The same as boxing had to feel it. The same as Kung Fu and Aikido and all these gyms had to feel it when the UFC sprung up in 1993. That is what boxing has on the line. I side with boxing. When people hear me say this, they think I'm burying boxing. I'm not. I am keeping my fingers crossed and believing that I've been boxing since I was 19 years old. I'm 40 years old, so more than half of my life. If I find out that all that hard work and sacrifice I put in, believing that I was learning this wonderful striking art, is nothing more than two guys with ounces of wraps on their hands throwing punches at one another, it will devastate me. It really will. And I'll thank God and Jesus above that I also learned how to wrestle. But it will devastate me. And it is devastating the boxing community so much that they are rejecting this. They don't want to see what's going to happen because they are aware of the reality that they could find out everything they believed is false. And if I was Floyd Mayweather, I would come out and tell the truth because he's not smart enough. Now, there's some guys that can swerve. This was your question. I went on that whole rant to answer your simple question of how should he handle it. The truth is always your friend. And if you're not a good actor, and he's not, if you're not a good psychologist, and he's not, you got to come out and shoot. You got to just come out and tell the truth. There's a bunch of money on the line. Don't think Stephen A. Smith. I don't feel it. I feel it more than when I fought Shane Mosley, and I imagine he does. Shane Mosley's one hell of a good boxer. Much more likely to beat him than Conor ever was on paper. But what was at risk to lose to a world champion like Shane Mosley, who's got wins over Oscar De La Hoya and many others, what's at risk is not near as much as what's at risk to fail against an Irishman who has an amateur record.
What was Clayton's logic?
Exactly what Floyd said. He said he's 40 years old. He said he slowed down. He said, I don't think he's big enough. I go, Clayton, none of those things are real. When has the bigger man ever won? He said, Chael, the bigger man always wins. Oh, well, give me an example. Give me a name, because I could give you a whole bunch where that's not true. He said the younger guy usually wins. Okay, well, that part he's got me on. That is true. Floyd is up there in years for boxing, but he's talking about I haven't done this in 2 years. Conor's 28 years old. Conor hadn't done it in 28 years. So that one's out the window. Conor's never done it.
You're assuming, though, that Conor hasn't trained boxing. Why?
No, I'm not. Come on, man. Ryan, don't do this. You've trained MMA guys.
I don't think it needs to be this dramatic.
You've trained Randy Couture. You've trained me. You've trained Dan Henderson. You've trained Kai Lynn. You were just in Dennis Bermuda's corner a week ago. I'm well aware that we all train a level of boxing. You have to concede to me, as the guy that made us do it, it's 20% of the time at most. The other 20% we're working on some kicks. The other 20% we're working on some grappling. The other 20% we're working on strength and conditioning. Sure. The other 20% we're working on the submissions. So it's 20% of the time. There's only two hands in boxing. There's no kicks to use for setups. There's no fake takedowns to look for setups. There's two hands. You can only throw 4 punches. A jab, a cross, a hook, and an uppercut. That's it. Floyd's been doing this second generation. He was doing it when he was in the womb in some instances, quite literally. Since the day he came out, according to his pops, he's been boxing. I believe his old man. Clayton Hires beat his old man. Clayton Hires, who sat in that chair on that microphone and looked at me the same as you're doing, fought Floyd Mayweather Sr. and beat him. Only 4 guys ever beat him. Clayton was one of them, and Clayton said to me, I don't like the matchup.
Do you know what the 10,000-hour rule is?
Yes, I know what the 10,000-hour rule is.
What is it?
If you to be a master of something, you've got to do it for 10,000 hours. Once you've done something for 10,000 hours, you're a master. What you challenge?
No,
I don't know.
That's not what it is. It actually came from chess, and they looked at how long it took a chess master to become a chess master. Some people did it in 2,000 hours. Some people did it in 20,000 hours. 10,000 was the average. Some people never could do it. Didn't matter how long they went. They just simply didn't have the ability to get to that level. But the 10,000-hour rule is in a lot of ways, it's bullshit. Because you assume just do this for 10,000. If I box for 10,000 hours, I'll be as good as Floyd Mayweather. No, you won't. Some people can never get there. So my question to you is, Conor's an elite athlete, a gifted striker who's won a lot of fights by knockout. Sure, maybe he has spent 20% of his time on boxing, but is that enough if he's rising up in his capabilities as an athlete? And if Floyd is going down in his capabilities of an athlete, does that fake 10,000-hour rule play in? Maybe it took Conor 1,000 hours of work.
And I'll tell you this, as passionate as I am on this, I don't know. And the only way to find out is August 26th, and that's the bottom line, because that is what people are asking.
We got to know what happens.
And there is a tipping point to where you just don't get better. I can tell you it in conditioning. There is a level of conditioning where you're in shape and you are not going to get in better shape. Now, you can maintain that and you can hold that. There's going to be some dips and some valleys, and they're going to be very slight, but you can hold it. But contrary to what some people believe, well, no, I can push harder and harder and harder and get better shape. No, you can max out.
You're right, but it doesn't just go for sports or chess. I just read something interesting. If you go see a doctor, let's say you go see a surgeon, should you see the surgeon who's been in practice for 30 years or the surgeon who's been in practice for 9 years? Who do you pick?
Well, I would imagine this is a trick question, so I'll say both sides. The 30-year because he's got the experience, but the 9 years because he's probably a little bit fresher on the current events.
Yeah, that's it. You see, you pick the doctor who's a little bit younger. So he's had enough experience to see most everything, but he's still in the frame of mind that he's learning and growing. If you see someone who's done anything for 20 years or 30 years, the chances of them that they're still getting better, that they still have the attitude that they want to test themselves to learn something new, to question what they've been doing, almost never happens. People get into a rut and they compete it. And what actually happens is you'll get one person who's been doing something for 20 years. What he really has is 1 year of experience that he's repeated 20 times. So I think that point is actually valid here, and that how much has Mayweather improved over the past 10 years as a fighter, and how much in the past 3 or 4 years has Conor improved as a fighter. Conor's been doing different things. He's learning. He's growing. Floyd, no way. He's buying houses. He's flying here. He has watches. He has this. And he's over 40 years old. Interesting.
Who do you think wins this fight?
You know, if I had to bet, I would say Mayweather, but something, that 49 number, the pressure that he's going to feel coming in, who knows? He's fighting a bigger, longer guy. I know you don't think that means anything. I do. I think there's weight classes for a reason, and he's going to be probably 20 pounds heavier, 25 pounds heavier come fight night. Floyd is not a knockout guy. Hasn't really knocked someone out in a decade.
But don't you feel that data is irrelevant as well? I mean, people keep saying that the Conor punch is harder. First off, that is absolutely, there's no punch of the 4 that are allowed in this contest that Conor does harder than Floyd. People will argue he does because Conor's been putting people down and Floyd hasn't put anybody down in a while. That is not a secure focus group, though, because Conor's throwing at MMA guys who spend 20% of the time on this. Floyd is throwing them at experts that have spent their entire life at rolling and bobbing and weaving and dealing with those punches. So it is absolutely not apples to apples there.
True.
Floyd hits much harder than Conor, and should. Much harder. But a lot of people...
How do you justify... How would you qualify that?
A lot of people look at that and go... Yeah, a lot of people, I'll get asked that question. It's like, well, guys, there's several ways to do it. First off, I base it on the fact that I know boxers. I know how hard they hit in comparison to our biggest punchers in MMA. Secondly, I've seen them on bags. I can tell, my eyes don't lie. I'm watching who's hitting a bag hard. Conor hits plenty hard. He doesn't hit anywhere close as hard as Floyd with any of the punches. A jab, a cross, a hook, or the uppercut. The only 4 techniques that are allowed in this fight. They're not even remotely close. But you'll hear these arguments made. All of this stems from, it's not just my opinion on who's going to, I can have any opinion I want. I can be as passionate as about. People that listen to this show know full well, Chael Sonnen is the single worst predictor. When it comes down to a fight, I get terrible predictions, but I am very passionate on it, and I will support my beliefs with data. I will say, well, look at the history and look at what happened here.
But you're not giving any data, though. You can't say, oh, I saw Floyd hit a bag, and it was way harder than Conor's.
Well,
how do you qualify that?
Oh, most certainly I could. Absolutely I could. And I will agree with you. Like, as you just said that back to me, that does sound a little bit fugazi. I do get that. But most certainly I could.
How much harder? Is it 5? He's 50%, 100% harder?
I know how hard. I know who hits harder than me. And
that makes no sense whatsoever.
I'm going to let the argument go because
I saw him hit a bag.
I will let the argument go because you're right. I cannot, with my rhetorical skills, say, but I stand by it. But I will admit I'm going to sound like a fool if I continue down this road because you had to say I watched him on the back. But Ryan, I want to make this point to you. I want to make this final point to you. This whole thing came up because you asked me what should Floyd be saying. And I'm telling you, he should not undersell himself as a way of getting people more interested. He should continue to sell himself. But he should come out and tell the truth. And in your final analysis right there, when I asked you who was going to win, you started to break it down and go, well, Floyd, you started to break down, but you proved the point that I'm making, that he does feel those pressures. You use that exact word. He should talk about that. He should steer into it. He should say, man, I built a career. I always show up on fight night. I've largely been the underdog. I've largely had naysayers. This is the first time ever I've got everybody in the world saying not only should I win, I had better win, and I better do it fast. And Michael A. Smith, I'm feeling that. It's got me a little bit off. It has me in a unique spot mentally because I've never been in it before. I trust that I'm going to deal with it, but make no mistake, I know what's on the line here. I think that's what he should do. He shouldn't come out and try to swerve us.